I really didn't want to step back into this world. The ending of Game of Thrones, as someone who read the books, rewatched the show, and spent countless hours going down fan theory rabbit holes, was painful. And I know this might be an unpopular opinion, but getting through House of the Dragon was no consolation for me. It felt like I was revisiting something I used to love, but not quite finding what made me love it in the first place. But when curiosity got the better of me and I finally sat down to watch A Night of Seven Kingdoms, I was struck by how different and refreshing it felt. And by the end, I realized it wasn't different. It felt like I had found what I'd been missing. After watching A Night of Seven Kingdoms, I started to think about House of the Dragon again. It's not that I don't appreciate what it's doing, because I really do. It's visually breathtaking, ambitious in its writing, and the performances are incredible. When it's good, it's really good. By all accounts, I should love this show. I've tried to love this show, but I don't. It's not because it's bad, it just feels like something's missing, and I wanted to understand why. The goal of season 1 is to cover a lot of ground quickly. The show is based on Fire and Blood, a timeline of historical events written by a maester who didn't know its subjects personally. So, while House of the Dragon tells a story that spans generations, it's also attempting to fill in the narrative gaps left by its source material. It makes sense that the writers chose to adapt the timeline directly, rather than beginning at a fixed point, and build the character work into it. However, to do that in a single season, the show relies on some risky storytelling choices. Multiple time jumps, casting different actors for older and younger versions of the characters, and condensing certain character arcs and plots. To me, this is House of the Dragon's original sin. The writers were hoping to get through an expansive backstory to provide the context for events described in Fire and Blood. They were hoping that because you saw the characters at different points in their life, in various circumstances, that you would understand them intimately. They were hoping that spending some time in their past would properly set the stage for the events of their future. Unfortunately, it's difficult to build an effective emotional case for these characters when you're speedrunning through their foundation. Instead of taking the time to flesh them out and deepen your understanding of their world, you're jumping through time, having to reorient yourself with relationship dynamics that have changed, evolved, or deepened off screen, and trying to find your footing in a story that doesn't have the time to settle. The show is constantly interfering with its own momentum. We're often experiencing a time jump immediately after a pivotal moment, interrupting the emotional breakthroughs and development that are necessary in building out the complexity and inner world of our characters. Many characters are left underdeveloped, despite being positioned as central to the story, while other characters are given a disproportionate amount of focus beyond the point of understanding. By the time the story finally slows down for the primary conflict of Season 2, a lot of the characters still felt distant to me. I can understand them on a cognitive level. I get why they're doing what they're doing, but I don't feel I have access to anything deeper. That, in combination with the much higher stakes, creates a story that starts to feel urgent and stagnant at the very same time. Even as it arrives at a fixed narrative point, it still moves forward quickly and looks away too soon. Even with the luxury of time, the show still blows past things that are worthy of direct interrogation, and instead relies on inference. Meanwhile, moments in between conflict can feel like characters are waiting for something bigger to happen rather than building something meaningful in the meantime. We've arrived at the outcomes of these relationships, the resentment, the paranoia, the discord, the alliances, but we have steamrolled through their development. Though it is clear that the characters have complicated feelings about these outcomes, the tension lies less in the complexity of their character or their inner conflict boiling over, and more in their indecision and flippancy. It makes their choices and their actions feel abrupt and impulsive, rather than inevitable and understandable. If it feels like the writers are having trouble reaching conclusions about the characters, what are we to conclude? As mentioned previously, the structure of the show is to arrive at points along a timeline, and that's been accomplished. The story is the story. The smaller moments in between, where meaningful character development grows, are secondary. Even though we spent time watching these characters grow up, it feels more about their proximity to certain events than informing their inner world. The show does move through major events successfully, but it does so by working backward. The story begins with a collection of major bullet points, and the characters are retrofitted into its framework. The characters feel guided to where the plot needs them to go, rather than events being shaped by compounding character motivations. In House of the Dragon, everything revolves around moving pieces around a war map and dragon riding, as promised in Fire and Blood. In the show that came before it, we as the audience were trained to focus on the people behind those decisions, the ones making the moves, the ones getting on those dragons. At its best, the spectacle of dragons and large-scale battles in Game of Thrones felt earned. They were the payoff, built on deep interpersonal conflict, shifting alliances, and fully realized character arcs. They were cherries on top of a rich and engaging story. In House of the Dragon, it starts to feel like the main course, and no matter how impressive it is, you can't live on cherries alone. It feels reminiscent of Game of Thrones at not its best, when it stopped feeling like complex characters making difficult decisions and started feeling like characters making decisions that didn't make a lot of sense, where it started to feel like the show was banking on a few high-stakes episodes to deliver, while everything in between became a little stagnant. This is why House of the Dragon can feel like it's standing in its predecessor's shadow, because it's leaning into the very things that pulled Game of Thrones away from what made it work in the first place. And when so much weight is placed upon those big blockbuster set pieces, it's easy for a lot to get overlooked along the way. And as it turns out, spending time in more of those overlooked moments had led me right to what I'd been missing. Where House of the Dragon is constantly building toward its biggest moments, A Knight of Seven Kingdoms finds its strength in everything in between. It starts in a surprisingly simple place, not with a war or a throne or a massive political conflict, but with a loss, a person burying someone who gave his life direction and purpose, suddenly left to figure out who he is without him. From that moment on, every decision, every conversation, it all matters. Every interaction reveals something about the world, about the people in it, and about how those people see each other. Who mocks and looks down on our protagonist? Who tries to take advantage of him? Who gives him a chance? Who is able to see beyond a title or a circumstance of birth? And what does that say about them? The storytelling is efficient. Even the smallest moments carry their weight. Nothing feels wasted. Each scene adds another layer. You're not waiting for meaning to emerge, it's already there, building as you watch. Characters who seem secondary at first aren't just passing through. They shape what happens next. Even the briefest connections can leave an impact, guiding the story forward. So when those moments come back around, when people take sides, when choices have consequences, you understand why. It all stays rooted in something familiar. Wanting to prove yourself. Knowing that you're different from the way that the world sees you. Trying to figure out who you are outside of what you were born into. Speaking honestly, even when it comes at a cost. These aren't complicated ideas, but they don't need to be. When something happens, when the characters succeed, when they're rejected, when they're hurt, you feel it because you understand what it means to them, and you really grow to care about them. A big part of that is the effort to build out the world itself. It feels human. There's room for contrast, darkness, and intensity, but also moments that feel alive. People laughing, drinking, joking, finding small moments of joy in the middle of everything. Because even in moments of uncertainty, that's what people do. It creates a world that feels accessible and familiar. The story uses its unusual point of entry to its advantage, bringing the focus out of stuffy castles and into a setting that more accurately reflects the exhilarating highs and brutal lows of human nature. It doesn't need to lean on anything else. It's exciting to see dragons, but the show proves that the payoff can feel just as big and just as earned without them. And that's what makes A Night of Seven Kingdoms feel like a true departure, not just in structure or scale, but in what it believes is worth paying attention to. House of the Dragon is a story about a political power struggle: who's supposed to have it, who wants it, and who ultimately comes out on top. A Knight of Seven Kingdoms is less interested in what it means to wield power over others and more in the kind of power found in becoming who a person chooses to be. In this story, power isn't just political, it's personal. The stakes aren't just about who sits on the throne, but who gets to decide their own future and what their name really means. In narrowing the scope, you're able to examine that idea with real nuance. It's not only dominance, authority, and supremacy. It's agency, autonomy, and self-determination. The story's tension isn't rooted in something distant or arbitrary, but in something much deeper and more intimate. And that's why those smaller moments matter as much as they do. They're the story's heartbeat. Instead of focusing on desired outcomes based on bloodlines and prophecies, we focus on experiences, relationships, and the overall journey. In this story, it doesn't matter what the maesters of Westeros would write about you, or if they would write about you at all. How would you live on in the hearts and minds of people who actually knew you? What would you say about you? And in returning to that, it feels like we've reconnected with something that was always at the heart of this world. Not just the spectacle, not just the dragons or the battles or the crusade for the Iron Throne, but the stories of the people living through it and underneath it all. The ones who may eventually claim the Iron Throne, but also the ones who may not be remembered, the ones who maybe no one is watching, the ones who exist in the quiet moments in between but are capable of shaping the world around them. These are the stories that I'd been missing. I'd missed being invited into the more personal moments, getting to know someone not just through who they are, but what they do, watching their character develop when they think no one can see them. Those moments aren't random. They're the quiet engine of the story of Westeros. The unassuming characters, the smaller stories, they can feel inconsequential and often get overlooked. But sometimes, they're the ones that stay with you the most.